Slow down, you move too fast. You got to make the morning last. Just kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy. Ba-da-da-da-da-da, feeling groovy. Hello lamppost, what you knowin'? I come to watch your flowers growin'. Ain't you got no rhymes for me? Do it and do-do, feeling groovy. Ba-da-da-da-da-da, feeling groovy. I got no deeds to do, no promises to keep. I'm dappled and drowsy and ready to sleep. Let the morning time drop all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy.
Said, brother, can I borrow a thin, brother, you know, a dime? Say, sis. I sure like to have this old dime for me so I can get this cup of coffee. Caught me a snack or something. I guess I better quit trying to be hip and get on down. Hey, man, like, you know. I was born in New York City on a Monday. It seems I was out trying to shoot by Tuesday noon. All the bad cats and the bad hats doing me a real big favor. I got the bad cats and the bad hats playing it on real good. There's a dime boy, give me a shine boy. Oh, just when the cold wind comes, it lives in New York City, and the streets no place to be, but there you are. So you try hard or you die hard. No one really gives a good damn. You try hard and you die hard. No one gives a damn. There's a dime boy, give me a shine boy. Burning hot in New York City. Ain't no way to be, but wherever you go, when you're down and out in New York City, I'm never gonna get that way again. Oh! No, not me. When you need a friend, need to have her. When you want a friend, gonna get myself together till the morning. Gonna leave it all like a one bad dream. All the bad cats and the bad hats doing me a real big favor. They got the bad cats and the bad hats playing it on real good.
drop me off in Harlem. Yeah, good old Harlem. You have your fun under the Harlem sun, so drop me off in Harlem. There's Duke Ellington up in Harlem. He writes all his tunes in Harlem. And old Satchmo's still swinging way up in Harlem. All the cats are still up there. They're beating out those riffs. And Apollo, Puerto Rico, give you a great big lift. Yes, drop me off in Harlem. Yeah, man, beautiful Harlem. You get red beans and rice, it's very nice. Way up there in Harlem, that is.
logs rolling in off the East River bank like a shroud. It covers Bleecker Street, fills the alleys where men sleep, hides the shepherd from the sheep. Voices leaking from a sad cafe, smiling faces try to understand. I saw a shadow touch a shadow's hand on Bleecker Street. Crooked rhyme, holy, holy is his sacrament. $30 pays your rent on Bleecker Street. Heard a church bell softly chime in a melody sustaining. It's a long road to Canaan on Bleecker Street.
Good morning, everybody. So we've been talking about it for days now. We are in the midst of trying to fight back against a second wave of COVID taking on New York City. And we need to remember our ability to fight back, the power of all New Yorkers to fight back. We're in the middle of something really tough right now, and we see such painful realities all over the country. But New York City continues to be strong, and New Yorkers are doing the right thing. Let me tell you just about testing alone. This last week, almost 300,000 New Yorkers went and got tested. On Friday alone, this last Friday, almost 75,000 New Yorkers got tested. That is crucial to our ability to fight back this disease. That is New Yorkers taking matters into their own hands in the best way. And I'm also seeing all over the city an extraordinary amount of mask usage. We need to keep deepening that. Dr. Choxey will talk about that in just a moment. But look, the things we've talked about from the beginning, starting with testing, that's what works. So I'm going to keep saying it to everyone. If you haven't been tested, get out there. It's available, it's free, it's easy, it's quick. If you haven't been tested at all, get tested. If you haven't been tested in a while, get tested. It makes such a huge difference at this moment. And so many New Yorkers are responding. And I think New Yorkers understand, after the heroic efforts of these last 8 months, that it really makes a difference what each person does. So we're going to keep talking about this. We've seen such horrible problems around the country. We know everyone's going through a lot of fatigue, but New Yorkers are tough and New Yorkers are resilient, and we can keep fighting back this second wave. It will not be easy. If anyone says, look at what's happening around us, isn't it overwhelming, the challenges we face? We face profound challenges, that is true. But the way to respond to these challenges is not to give up and not to be mesmerized by the extent of the problem, but to remember our ability to fight back. That's the only thing that's going to make a difference. So we're going to talk about the things that matter, testing, obviously, mask usage, tough things we're going to ask of people, like not traveling for the holidays. Again, it pains me to suggest it, but it's what we need. People really should not travel for these holidays, really should keep family gatherings as small as possible. Won't be easy, but it's the best way to stop this upsurge that we've seen lately. Now let's talk about our schools. It's on everyone's minds. I'll go over the indicators in a moment, but today New York City schools are open. Tomorrow they will be open as well. We've got a fight ahead to keep them open. But I'm not giving up, and you shouldn't give up either. Every day that we can keep our schools open is a blessing for our children and our families. So we set the 3% standard, and that was part of how we were able to open our schools to begin with. I remind people, you go back to August, September, many doubting Thomases, many folks said New York City public schools would never open, largest school system in the country. I am proud to say that so many of us believed they could open and they needed to open and we could do it safely, and we did do it safely. Now a lot of the same people are saying, look how safe our schools are. Well, that's a blessing. They are safe. It's been amazing. And thanks to parents and students and educators and staff and our healthcare workers who have done so much to keep our schools safe. But we made a promise that we would set a gold standard for safety in our schools, that we would provide every conceivable measure, whether it's face coverings for all students and staff alike, social distancing, ventilation, constant cleaning, so many measures. 10 kids in a classroom typically, things you couldn't have imagined. All of those measures together have kept our schools safe, but we also said that we would hold to a 3% threshold. We said that to give people confidence that we would put health and safety first, and we have put health and safety first, and we will put health and safety first. So we're sticking to that threshold. And I believe there's still a chance to fight back this disease and keep our schools open for a good while ahead. But if that is not our reality, if in fact we surpass the threshold, then we will have the immediate effort to get schools back and get them back quickly. In the meantime, our Learning Bridges initiative, our child care, will be available for essential workers and for anyone in particular need according to the priorities we've set. and we're going to make sure to accommodate those who have those great needs. But remember, we're not to that point yet. Our schools remain open, and you can help them remain open by participating, by going out and getting tested if you haven't, by wearing a mask, by practicing social distancing, by helping everyone in your life know to avoid indoor gatherings, particularly without masks on. So again, it gets back to what you can do, particularly as the weather gets colder. The bar is being raised on us that what we have to do is more and more to fight back. But again, this is the place that fought back before and succeeded. So here to tell you about how important it is to wear masks and the other measures that we need to implement right now to fight back this second wave, our Health Commissioner, Dr. Dave Choxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As New Yorkers, we all know someone who has been affected by COVID-19. For some of us, it has been a firsthand, often painful, sometimes lingering experience. For others, it's someone near to us who suffered because of the virus, perhaps a neighbor, a friend, or a relative. Or it may be someone we know, even if we don't know their full name: the bus driver, barber, bodega owner, and the people who write the news that you read every day. What those fellow New Yorkers went through must be a reminder of what's at stake right now. Many of us are experiencing pandemic fatigue. Look, I get it. But we can't let COVID fatigue turn into compassion fatigue. Trying to prevent more suffering is why I won't be traveling or seeing people who are so close to me this holiday season. We do have some difficult weeks ahead, and what we do, what we say, and the choices that we make, they all send a message. Making that decision not to host a holiday gathering and telling your loved ones why conveys a message of care and caution for those who are closest to you. We have suffered so much from the spread of the virus, but we have to remember that positive behavior spreads as well. One important action that we are asking all New Yorkers to take is to mask up, both outdoors and indoors, anytime you're outside of your own home. That includes when you're getting together with people whom you know well, whether they are friends or relatives beyond your immediate family. The virus takes advantage of our familiarity and often transmits in smaller social gatherings, such as birthday parties or friends gathering to watch the big game. That's why our new health department campaign, Indoors or Outdoors, Keep Your Face Covering On, is reminding New Yorkers that COVID-19 can spread easily indoors, particularly as the weather becomes colder. So unless you're younger than 2 or you have a medical condition that prevents wearing your face covering, please wear it, indoors and outdoors, and make it into an everyday routine, just like putting on your jacket or coat before you head out. The CDC recently affirmed that face coverings protect those who wear them, and that mask in someone else's home or wherever you may encounter them is yet another message of care for those around you. In the days ahead, spreading these positive actions must be more contagious than the virus itself. That's how we're going to get through this together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choxey, and that's a clear message to us all, everything we need to do. And remember, there's so many reasons for hope. The extraordinary efforts of New Yorkers over these months should give you hope. The fact that there is now real progress on a vaccine, and we can see the day when the vaccine starts to be distributed coming closer and closer, and this city is ready to distribute that vaccine quickly once we get it. Obviously, the new leadership that we look forward to in Washington to help us out of this crisis, there's a lot of reason for hope. But let's win this battle before us right now. And let's fight this immediate challenge by everyone doing what we all need to do to keep the coronavirus at bay. And now, perfect segue to going over our indicators for the day. So number 1, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19, the threshold of 200 patients. Again, interesting day, 92 patients. Now that's a number we'd like to get lower, obviously. And we are always watching to see where this number will go because it is a lagging indicator, but it still remains at a level that the hospital system is handling well. This confirmed positivity rate, though, continues to go up. That's obviously a concern, 44.2%, so we're watching that carefully. New reported cases on a 7-day average threshold, 550. We've obviously gone far past that. Today's report, 1,057 cases. Very worrisome on its face. Do juxtapose that, though, with the massive amount of testing that's now happening. Again, when 75,000 people get tested in a single day, that was Friday, the highest testing level we've had in the entire time of the coronavirus. Of course, you're going to see more positive cases because we're finally getting more and more people tested as we've wanted to for a long time. So some of that's explained by more testing. Obviously, some of that also shows the challenge that we're facing. And then number 3, percentage of people testing citywide positive for COVID-19, threshold 5%. Today's report is 1.68%, and the 7-day rolling average 2.77%. Now a few words in Spanish. Todos los neoyorquinos debemos estar preparados para lo que viene en los próximos días y semanas. Una segunda ola del virus nos amenaza, pero podemos evitar mucho de lo que vimos al principio de la pandemia. Cada acción nuestra para proteger vidas es un paso para vencer este nuevo desafío, y juntos lo vamos a lograr. With that, let's turn to our colleagues in the media. Please let me know name and outlet of each journalist.
Hi all, we'll now begin our Q&A. With us today is Health Commissioner Dr. Dave Choxey, Dr. Ted Long, Executive Director of the Test and Trace Corps, Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza, and Senior Advisor Dr. Jay Varma. And with that, we'll go to Rich Lim from WCBS 880.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Rich, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. So let me just ask you a question about the school situation, the closure, the 3% trigger. So given the governor's recent statements about the 3% trigger, I know you must be aware of them, given the disruption an in-person shutdown would cause, and given the extremely safe environment the schools unexpectedly are, since you made your 3% pledge, how is it breaking a commitment or a promise to keep the schools open in the face of new facts? And why is rational flexibility not called for here?
Rich, I appreciate the question. I really do. And it's something that we've talked through a lot. I've talked to the governor multiple times about it. Our teams are talking. Our health teams are talking in the city and between the city and the state. But remember, it comes down to this. There is a second wave bearing down on us. We're trying to beat it back. We said we would make health and safety the priority. We said we would hold this standard. That was part of how we convinced everyone that it would be safe to come into the schools. Now, we did expect our schools to be safe. The only way I differ with you is say it is not unexpected that our schools are safe. We expected them to be safe. We've been very, very impressed by the work everyone's done. They're extraordinarily safe. But that said, we set a standard. We asked everyone to trust it and believe in it. It's important to keep consistency with that. If we surpass that standard, and that is not a given, but if we do, then the conversation we're having with the state is how to quickly come back and what it's going to take. And the governor spoke about it this morning. We've been talking about additional testing measures, additional things that we could do to come back quickly. But it is important to recognize that we are dealing with a serious threat of a second wave that has real ramifications for all of us. And if we do have to shut down, we would work to come back very quickly with additional safety measures. Go ahead, Rich.
Okay, so let me follow up just by asking very directly, could the governor overrule you on this?
Of course, the governor has the power in so many areas because of this crisis and his emergency powers to make a range of decisions. But we've talked it through, our teams have talked it through, and I think there's a broad agreement that keeping faith with everyone, that the standard we put forward, being consistent about it, and then raising the bar for a comeback, but finding a way to come back quickly is the path forward. Go ahead.
Next, we have Katie from the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My about mask wearing, which we all know is very important, and this is part of a outreach campaign from the health department. But I know this has been asked of you multiple times throughout this pandemic. It seems a lot of employees have a reluctance to wear masks, particularly police officers. I know I covered a protest 2 weeks ago. Many officers did not wear masks. They got mad when you asked them to put one on. So I'm curious if the city is sort of doing more outreach, or at least checking with its own employees to ensure that the city's employees are practicing what you're preaching in terms of safety for the rest of us here in the city.
Well, it's a good question, Katie, and they have to. And we've had this conversation with city agencies and many city agencies many times. They have to. I think there has been some real progress. I think there has to be more, and I think there has to be consequences for anyone who doesn't wear a mask. So that work continues. Sometimes, particularly in public safety work or in health work, there may be a valid reason, but overwhelmingly, all public servants should have those masks on, period. And if they don't, there should be consequences.
Thanks. And my second question is about the testing being used and the positivity rate being used to close schools. You know, we've seen the numbers fluctuate hugely, right, over the last few days, which is confusing to parents and teachers and administrators. So do you think we're trying to capture the second threat and the positivity rate, but when something can be sort of easily mixed by huge groups of people going in to get tested and that, I mean, is there a better way to make a decision that could affect, you know, more than 1 million students and everyone who works there and their families, especially if you can suddenly have a rush of people testing to skew a figure that was high a week ago?
Okay, let me start and get Dr. Choxey into this too. The truth is what we find when more and more people get tested. This has been what we've called for from the beginning. Obviously, in the early months, we just weren't given the testing capacity we needed by the federal government. But now that we have more and more, thank God, we keep telling people the more people get tested, the clearer picture we get. If more and more people get tested and the positivity level keeps going up, that tells you something profound. If more and more people get tested and the positivity level goes down, that is important and reassuring. So I would say I think the positivity level is the truest measure, but we look at other measures as well. There are almost 1 million students, but let's be clear, you know, right now we're trying to make sure we understand who truly wants to be in school and who wants to be in remote. It's been about 300,000 students that have been in school. That community of kids and families is deeply affected, and I certainly can relate to it because I was a public school parent. I feel what they're going through now. But it's also the community of people that demanded of us that we ensure that the schools were as absolutely safe as they could be and demanded tough standards. And again, to me, it's absolutely crucial to keep faith with them. Dr. Choxey, you want to speak about the testing piece?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. You covered the high points here. I'll just reiterate that percent positivity, the test positivity rate, is one of the most important measures. We've seen that in New York City, but that's also the experience of other municipalities, states, countries around the world. And that's because it helps us understand what's happening over time with respect to how the epidemic is growing and spreading. The reason for that is that if we do see cases increasing, then that is likely to be reflected in the test positivity rate. We know this because the more people that get tested, particularly when you have cases on the upswing, that means that the percent positivity will go up concomitantly as well. And unfortunately, we do have predicates that we can look at around the country right now where percent positivity rates, continue to climb as those epidemics get worse. So as the mayor said, that's one of the measures that we use in the panoply that we follow. We're particularly looking with concern at the number of cases that are growing over time as well. But for the single measure that gives us the most information, the test positivity rate is a good one.
Go ahead.
Next is Kala from Pix 11.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone on the call. I
Hey.
just wanted to know after speaking with the governor, would you be considering the governor's suggestion for, in the future, setting a threshold within the schools and not the communities or the cities as a whole? Because he keeps saying, and he's going back and forth a little bit, that the schools are now not the issue, it's restaurants and gyms.
Kala, I don't think that's everything he's saying, to be fair. I think the governor's looking at the wholeness of this crisis just like we are, and restaurants and gyms, there's some particular concerns, but we've got something much, much bigger than just restaurants and gyms we're dealing with. But to your core question, yeah, we're going to look at different approaches, including what's happening in the schools across the board, and then what's going on in specific schools and what we can do to ensure they are safe, including potentially additional testing. There's a lot of good discussion going on about how to strike that balance. But it all is against a backdrop where job one is to fight this thing back. And so I think all these questions are very, very valid, but I want to remind people, every single time people do the things we're asking of them, they help us get to the heart of the matter, which is this disease can be defeated. We do not have to give in to it. And that's where I want the first energy to be. Is everyone doing everything they can do to stop this? Is everyone wearing a mask to the maximum extent possible, doing their distancing? Has everyone, unfortunately, canceled their holiday travel because we need that? We need those smaller gatherings, local gatherings. I understand everyone wants to say, well, what is the government doing? These are fair questions, but we also have to ask ourselves, are we doing the maximum to fight this disease back? The more we do, the more we can keep open for the life of this city. Go ahead, Cal.
I know you mentioned learning bridges, so I wanted to know what's going to happen with D75 special needs schools if schools shut down, and also what's the plan to keep remote learning attendance at an acceptable percentage, because we've seen this as a problem in the past when we shut down in March and then, of course, at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, Cal, it's a challenge, obviously, when we can't see kids in person. It is much harder in many ways to ensure attendance. I'll turn to the chancellor on this as well. But we did find over time more and more ways to connect with families and create continuity in attendance, and we're going to keep expanding those efforts for sure. What was the first part of your question, Cal? I'm sorry.
I wanted to know what's happening with D75 schools. You said Learning Bridges is open, but what about special needs?
We're working on that too, because I think it's fair to say all in-person education matters for our kids, but probably the kids who have the greatest needs and benefit the most from in-person education are our special needs kids. And so that's an area where we really want to figure out how we can protect those kids and their needs. And if we do have to shut down, get those back quickly. That would be a high priority. Chancellor, you want to speak to any of those issues?
Yes, sir. I think you hit the top lines, but again, we're prioritizing all of our most vulnerable student populations, which include our youngest students, but also include students in our D75 schools, as you've mentioned. We've also learned quite a bit since we pivoted to remote learning in March. And part of that is a really robust system that schools have and borough offices have to track students and to intervene when we haven't heard from students. Being able to be in-person learning since September 21st has also provided schools with the ability to make contact with students and have our teachers and our guidance counselors and social workers also involved, as well as our parent coordinators, in making contact with families as well. That won't change if we unfortunately have to pivot to all remote learning for a short time period. We'll just keep on making sure that we're tracking and we're intervening and looking for and staying in touch with students as we go forward. But as the mayor did mention, all of our vulnerable student populations, it's much more difficult for them in an all remote learning setting. So we're being very, very cognizant about the interventions to make sure that we're serving them in the unfortunate event we have to, for a short time, pivot to in-person remote learning.
Thank you.
Next is Marcia from WCBS.
Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying about schools and coming back. I point out to you that when there were red zones and orange zones, the governor allowed some schools to come back if they increased testing. So are you saying that if you had to close schools when it goes to 3%, you would try to evaluate the schools and the ability to test, and that you might be able to come back even though the numbers might be over 3% because you would be able to test more students, and that you would be able to make sure that the number, positive rate in the schools is below 3%?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head.
I mean, could you say exactly what you mean?
Well, you said it really well, but I'll add to it certainly if you want. Yeah, I mean, look, the state put forward that standard for the red zones, and that model could make a lot of sense here. We're obviously going to talk it through with the state. As the governor said this morning, and I've said, we need to keep a bond of trust with parents, with educators, with staff. We're going to be talking to all the stakeholders. But that is certainly one of the models that could work, to say we'll do additional testing requirements school by school as part of the pathway back.
Next is Alex from Chalkbeat.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask a question about remote learning more broadly. Obviously, the school year was always going to be about remote learning to some degree. Even under the hybrid plan, the vast majority of students would be learning remotely on most school days. And now that we're sort of staring down the possibility of wider school building shutdowns, I'm wondering if you can give a pretty specific accounting of what the city has done to improve remote instruction since the spring.
Yeah, let me start, Alex, and turn to the chancellor. But I want to make a point. I think I disagree a bit with your frame. Do not forget that here it is. It's November 16th. It's very early in the school year. That's a hopeful reality for me. That means we have a long way ahead. Both to constantly improve the work we're doing, including the remote work, but also we have a long time ahead to maximize the possibility of our kids coming back. And I don't mean just in terms of a temporary shutdown, this immediate problem. I'm saying the bigger picture. We now have vaccines emerging. That's the biggest factor here, obviously, in terms of our ability to not just bring back some kids, but potentially bring back all kids in the course of the school year. We have new leadership in Washington that I fundamentally believe is going to improve the fight against COVID, improve the level of trust people have in the vaccine, et cetera. So this ball game has just begun. The majority of the school year happens after January 1st. Basically 3 or 4 months before and almost 6 months after January 1st. So I'm planning with the chancellor and the whole team, not just for one scenario, but multiple scenarios. We said it in the very beginning. We might at various points have to go all remote, then go back to a mix. And then one day, I hope in this school year, we're going to be able to get to the point where we restore 5-day-a-week education across the board. So everything is a point on the continuum. But to your question about how to improve remote, this is an everyday effort, working with principals, working with teachers, working with the unions to figure out how to improve it. And what we're learning, even in the spring under duress, we found people made some really great improvements and innovations. That work is happening every week. Go ahead, Chancellor. Chancellor?
Yes, so, yes, sir, yeah. So this is a question that I think we continue to answer. And look, we've built tremendous capacity since we pivoted to remote learning in March, and we're building upon that capacity. Teachers have undergone many hours of professional development. We've developed and made available digital curriculum and digital supports for students, teachers, and parents. We're continuing to invest in the technology. So we've distributed over 300,000 devices. We're going to continue to distribute more devices as the need becomes apparent. We're working with the internet providers on providing Wi-Fi. We're providing LTE-enabled devices for students in temporary shelters. We're continuing to make sure that the scheduling that's happening in school is based on the continuum learning for students, so that the teacher that's teaching in person is coordinating with the teacher that's doing the remote learning, who is coordinating with those teachers that are doing 100% remote learning. Why? To make sure that students are getting a continuum of education that is not different based on the venue that they're receiving their education. In addition to that, we're wrapping around the academic work that's happening with trauma-informed curriculum and pedagogy. We've got tens of thousands of teachers that have been trained in that. We're looking at how do we then continue to move the education for students, whether it's in person or remotely, within a grading policy that makes sense given the pandemic that we're all facing. So there's a ton of work that continues to be done and that we've done. But again, this is all, and the mayor has been very clear about this, you can never replace in-person learning. There is a magic that happens when there is a caring, well-trained adult in a classroom with the student that you can never replace. And it's a fool's errand if anyone is trying to equate the fact that, well, remote, you have work to do in remote because, we hear all of these stories. We're educators, we understand that. But it's important to also understand that we're trying to make it the best we can, and we're doing better and better every single day, but we're not satisfied yet.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit more specifically, though, about like what the city is really doing to improve remote teaching. Like, I understand that you guys have, bought hundreds of thousands of devices, but that's kind of a separate question from the quality of what's actually delivered on those devices. Yeah. And so I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more specifically, other than, trainings, which I understand have been made available, but are also often optional, like what the city's, like what the DOE's strategy really is here to improve the quality of remote teaching. I understand your point about it not being as good as in-person teaching, but the fact of the matter is, the majority of instruction that's happening this year is happening remotely.
The majority of instruction that's happening so far this year, and again, I just want to keep us, Alex, I'm not negating your question, it's a very fair question. I just want to remind everyone, we are on a continuum, and the frustrating reality of the coronavirus is everything changes all the time, which makes it really hard for us to make sense of. But don't miss the forest for the trees, that our ability to profoundly address the situation has improved greatly in just the last few weeks because of the election and because of the announcements related to vaccine development. We have a very different reality in a few months. So I just don't want us to get lost in this moment in time. But your question is fair. I'll start and pass to the Chancellor. I think, Alex, this is a combination of the things that DOE centrally is doing, and that includes making sure there's enough devices, and that includes providing for the training, and that includes using the supervisory structure of the executive superintendents and the superintendents to do quality control school by school and keep pushing them to creatively improve their remote learning and listening to the concerns we're getting back from parents and students. But ultimately, a lot of this happens, of course, at the school level. Principals and educators determining the adjustments they need to make. And I see a lot of determination out there to do that, to keep improving. Chancellor, you want to speak to that?
I think we've answered this question multiple times. I think you were right on the money, sir. I mean, every day we want to do better than the previous day. We respond every single day to whatever challenges arise from remote learning. We're developing more digital curriculum. We're adding more digital curriculum. We have more training, more supports for not only teachers, but also students and parents. We're solidifying our platforms. I mean, I'm not really sure what else we can answer. We, like every school system across the country, are really working hard to make it as a positive and strong experience for students and for teachers every day possible.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Next is Sean from the Daily News.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I guess like all my colleagues, I'm also wondering about the situation with schools. I think one thing I haven't heard come up yet is the question of the union's role here. What's your read on what the UFT wants? Do you see them, kind of sticking to this idea of shutting an across the board shutdown if the 3% threshold is reached? Do you think they're more flexible, amenable to a targeted cluster? And yeah, could you just bring us up to speed? Excuse me, a targeted shutdown. And can you just bring us up to speed in your latest discussions with them?
Sean, I want to respect the fact that we have a lot of conversations and they're private conversations. I don't want to characterize past a point, and obviously they can speak for themselves. What I can say is, for months now, I've had multiple calls each week with both Michael Mulgrew and Mark Cannizzaro, the president of CSA, the Administrators Union. And they've been very productive, joined by the chancellor and the first deputy mayor. We do these multiple times a week. We get a lot done. There's been ongoing dialogue. I think there's a tremendous concern for health and safety for everyone in the school community. There's also consistently an understanding that in-person learning achieves much more for children than remote. And so we're having that conversation. And I believe the unions are having a conversation with the state as well. Everyone's talking, trying to figure out the best approach. I think the simplest beginning is to say, we set a standard, I think it was a fair standard of what would require a shutdown, but now we're all working together to figure out what's the quickest way back and the best standards for that quick turnaround. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, thanks for that. So switching gears to the Biden administration, obviously all eyes are on the numerous crises in the city now. But yeah, just looking ahead to, maybe the end of your own term, would you take a position in the Biden administration or any other role in Washington looking ahead to the new Democratic White House?
I appreciate the question. Look, I've got 14 more months of work to do. And can't tell you what it's been like. These last 8 months have been all encompassing, like every hour, every day. And that's where I'm going to keep my focus, is getting us out of this crisis and getting this city on with its recovery. And we will recover. I don't have a doubt in my mind. And the fact that there is a Biden administration is going to help us to speed up our recovery. So I will be right here until December 31st, 2021. And then, I'm certain the future will take care of itself.
We have time for two more. First up is Gersh from Streets Blog.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and everyone on the call. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Gersh. How you feel?
Thank you. Question for you, Mr. Mayor. To start, over the weekend, Councilmember Brad Lander proposed transferring responsibility for crash investigation from the NYPD to the DOT because, as Lander argued, citing a lot of evidence, the NYPD very rarely holds criminal drivers accountable anyway, and its crash investigations do not lead to changes in road design by the DOT anyway. The Lander proposal would also replace the NYPD's traffic enforcement with better road design and more enforcement cameras, which are not racially biased as many humans are. So what do you think?
Well, I haven't seen the details of the proposal. I'd say a couple of things. One, I want to see more and better prosecution of motorists who harm or kill pedestrians, bicyclists, or other motorists. This is something, Gersh, we talked about for a long time. There's been progress on those laws, both in the city and in Albany, but there needs to be more. I still think there's a bias in the American legal system for the motorist in a way that does not value human life enough. And we need to make continued reform on that front. That, to me, is the essence of the problem. I certainly want to see the NYPD be as rigorous as possible, and I don't think it's one thing or another. I think that there's been times when I've seen exactly what I want to see in terms of investigations. Other times I think we have to do more. So I'm not sure the notion is just send it to DOT and everything's okay. That said, I think there is definitely an interesting point about maximizing the role of DOT on the follow-through when we find a problem that emerges from a crash that leads to the need for greater change. Vision Zero has been all about constant change and improvement. So if there's more DOT needs to do to connect what's happened with a crash to the actions we have to take, I certainly want to look at that. But I'd be careful on the front end of this equation not to miss the important role that the NYPD has to play. Go ahead.
Okay, but just to follow up on that, you're definitely right about the bias in the legal system, but your collision investigation squad only investigates about 250 crashes a year when there are, in fact, thousands of serious crashes per year, meaning so few crashes are even investigated. So would you at least commit to expanding the NYPD collision investigation squad so it can inform DOT decisions?
I want the crashes that, I mean, there's obviously many different types, but the serious crashes, I want to make sure there's rigorous investigation and follow through. If we need to put more personnel on that, that's something I'm very open to and something we will come back on and address. But I want to be clear, again, I think part of the issue you're raising is an important issue. I want a very muscular approach by law enforcement to addressing when someone has recklessly harmed another human being. So that's where, to me, taking the NYPD out of the equation actually is counterproductive. Making sure there are enough investigations and rigorous enough investigations and tough enough follow-through by the NYPD and by prosecutors, by the way, is essential. And if we need to put more personnel on that, that's something I'm very open to.
For our last question, we'll go to Alejandra from AM New York.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I have another education question. So now that the opt-in period for blended learning has ended, when is the soonest that we can get updated enrollment numbers for blended learning? And does the city plan on releasing numbers, or enrollment numbers for Learning Bridges?
On the first point, the chancellor can jump in here. Obviously, we want to get those numbers out on the opt-ins quickly. I think it'll take at least a few days to make sure we have the final count right. And then, as I talked about last week, we really want to work with parents to make sure that all the parents who are in blended really have their kids taking full advantage of it in classrooms. And then on Learning Bridges, we've seen, so far, steady uptake in it, not the numbers we were expecting. I'll have to get back to you on exactly when we can give you an update, but we can do that soon. My hope is both of those we can get a sense of this week. Chancellor, you want to add?
Yes, sir. So the numbers on the opt-in, we will have this week. We're busy crunching those numbers right now, and we'll know school by school as well as borough by borough, and then obviously system-wide.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alejandra.
Oh, no, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Everyone, look, I'm going to conclude where I was earlier in this gathering. We've got to understand that with a second wave bearing down on us, there's an opportunity to fight. There's an opportunity to beat this back. This is our last chance to fight and beat it back. Whatever happens here, New Yorkers are going to be strong and resilient. And whatever happens here, thank God we're finally on the pathway to a vaccine and the bigger changes we need. But I don't want anyone to give up now when we still have a chance to beat this back. I talked to you about the indicators before. We see some areas where there's real concern, but we also see a lot more people getting tested. That's a very good thing, a very important thing. We see, thank God, the hospitalization is still a lot lower than one might have thought. That's a very good thing. We see our hospitals handling this crisis very well, having learned tremendous lessons from the spring. We are in this fight right now. So when it comes to New Yorkers and their ability to fight back, there is no such thing as a foregone conclusion. There is no such thing as saying New Yorkers are going to lose because we just assume they're going to lose. No, we have a chance to do something here historic. But it all comes down to each of you. And I think we understand that every individual action matters. We probably understand it in New York City better than anywhere else in the country. Obviously, a lot of places have gone through such a tough time. And they also got a lot of mixed messages from Washington and sometimes from their local leaders as well. And there also often wasn't enough devotion to data and science. What we tried to set up here was a simple concept. We're going to show you the numbers all the time. We're going to treat you like the adults you are and respect your intelligence and say, here's what's really happening. Now it's your time to act on this information. And New Yorkers have done it. We're asking you to go farther. We're asking you to wear this mask all the time. We're asking you to go out and get tested. We're asking you to change your holiday plans to protect your family and all of us. And I know New Yorkers will answer the call, and we can fight this back together. Thanks, everyone.